Hey folks! I was thinking that with the new advent of scripted video essays on my channel, I could hone my skills at making them with the occasional shorter scripted videos with a more casual vibe. I was thinking on what I could do while I'm working on the Zapper History Part 2 and thought why not do a top 10 games of 2025 since the year's about to end. Then I went through the list of games I streamed this year and decided 10 is simply not enough, so welcome to my top 15. Doesn't really roll off the tongue nearly as well as top 10, huh? I'd just like to make it clear that this is, obviously, my personal list, which means two things. One, I'm just rating these based on personal enjoyment. I kinda think trying to objectively determine GOTY rankings is a fool's errand and also kinda boring. Two, and this is an important one that surely any future top blank blanks of blanks will also include, I'm counting any game I played this year, even if it's decades old. I simply don't play enough brand new games in a year to fill a compelling favorites list, and it'd probably end up being populated with a bunch of games I'm just lukewarm on, with like 2 or 3 I actually love at the top. I really hate long intros, and I bet most of you do too. Let's get into it. Starting at number 15, we have Spyro the Dragon, like the old one, like the first one. I know this may seem an odd choice, but I'd never played it, and I picked it up this year and I was extremely pleasantly surprised at how much I loved it. Spyro was always a franchise on the periphery for me. I never really had any opinions or thoughts about it at all in the past, and I know fans tend to say the first one's a bit basic compared to the second and third in the trilogy, but I found myself totally enamored. I definitely see the simplicity, but I don't really mind it. I played this game right off the heels of Silksong, and I think that was perfect timing. I loved Silksong, but a total baby game like this was exactly what I needed after all those trials and tribulations. This is an entirely gem-centric game. It's a collectathon, where 90% of your time will be spent picking up rudimentary rotating PS1-era 3D models of colorful gemstones. If your priorities are even remotely in the same ballpark as mine, that sentence should have sold you on the game instantaneously. I love a collectathon that isn't afraid to just shower you with collectibles constantly and keep track of them in a satisfying little checklist you can look at for free endorphins. I love the sounds they make, I love the little glimmers of them you can see from a distance, I love the animation of all the gems you've collected flying out of a golden treasure chest and into a second identical golden treasure chest whenever you leave a level. It's all just so satisfying, even though a lot of the game could basically be construed as busy work. The other thing I love about this game, besides the gems, is the visual style. This is some classic early PlayStation 3D art, and I have to say, of the library of PS1 games I've played so far, it's easily one of my favorites visually. The character models are pretty normal looking, the enemies are very exaggerated and cartoony, but the environments are unironically breathtaking. It's the lighting, it's the color palettes, it's the dreamy 3D model looking skyboxes. It's the low level of detailed distant views that reduce structures to stylized blobs vaguely shaped like the things they're meant to represent, with floating point error-laden polygons shifting and bubbling at the slightest movement of the camera. I was awestruck at how certain parts of this game looked, and extremely disappointed to see that the remake doesn't really capture the same energy at all. I know the Reignited trilogy is somewhat beloved, and I'm sure they did a fine job on it, but from what little I've played of it, it doesn't come close to capturing the genuine ethereal beauty of the original Spyro 1's environments. I also just love this game for its comparative roughness when held up to other similar games of the time. The story is kind of a farce tonally, and all the dialogue is super stilted, and saving these big dragons always makes me chuckle because they usually have something weird and funny to say, even if that wasn't the desired effect.
The enemies here can be quite frightening, but you should watch the fools.
I'd rather flame the fools.
Now you're thinking.
Yes, murder them! I also love how laughably easy most of the boss fights are. Like, most platformers like this have protections in place that mean a boss encounter will last more than 10 seconds, but in this game you can usually just shred through them with even the most basic of attack strategies. It's refreshing in a way. I'd also just love to shout out treetops specifically. There's not a lot of challenge in this game besides maybe the final boss level and the flying levels, which I absolutely love, by the way. Treetops is above them all. In order to get all the gems and dragons in this level, you need to pull off this absolutely insane series of charge jumps that I'm sure many kids playing this game just simply never did. I could kinda see what the game was going for here. I tried to figure it out for a long time, and maybe I could have eventually got it, but I ended up looking it up and dropping my jaw at the apparently intended solution. It's not a preposterous thing to put in any game, but it does feel like a preposterous thing to put in this game. It is far and away the most difficult thing about the game by orders of magnitude, and you kinda can't help but love it for that. One more thing I'd like to mention about this game is the soundtrack, composed by none other than Stuart Copeland, who's done other soundtracks in the past, as well as, most famously, being the drummer in the fucking Police. What a strange crossover in the world of media. I honestly think this game's soundtrack is nothing special, but it certainly has a unique vibe, and I will never pass up the opportunity to dispense this odd bit of trivia. I had a big streak of Kirby games this year, going through what I would consider the entirety of the main line of the early era of Kirby, starting at the original Dreamland and ending with 64 The Crystal Shards. It's a series with highs and relative lows, but I found every single one I played to be at least somewhat enjoyable, with the standout to me being the first SNES Kirby game, Superstar. It's this big, indulgent pile of campaigns and game modes that all use the same core mechanics to deliver a variety of slightly different experiences. You get an extremely truncated but faithful remake of the original Dreamland, the iconic gourmet race minigame, 3 entire brand new campaigns centered around different Kirby antagonists, both old and new, and the Great Cave Offensive, a completionist's wet dream that's sure to eat up most of the playtime for 100%ers. The whole thing just oozes charm, and it's a perfect poster child for the SNES's strengths compared to the NES. The sprites are just so much more expressive, and the drastically increased memory space allows for visual effects way cooler than anything that was possible on the NES or Game Boy. And don't get me wrong, I really love the ones on the NES and Game Boy. They were extremely ambitious titles that really pushed the limits of their hardware. But going from that to this was like night and day. I won't drone on about all the game modes, but I do want to put the spotlight on my personal favorite mode, Revenge of Meta Knight. This mode marks the first appearance of Meta Knight's iconic airship, the Halberd, in a fast-paced, high-octane action campaign where Kirby thwarts Meta Knight's plan to take over Dreamland. This mode is equal parts cool and funny. Kirby is just such a complete force of nature, and it's hilarious seeing just how locked in he becomes in the face of a threat like the Halberd. He's so merciless that you kind of feel bad for the villains. For a very brief moment right at the beginning of the campaign, they're calm and collected, acting out their sinister plans with determined precision. But then basically the instant Kirby starts to put up a real fight, they start panicking and freaking out, and we get to see a bunch of dialogue from them having mental breakdowns as cute puffball Kirby utterly annihilates their defenses and instantly thwarts their every move. It just cracks me up reading this stuff and seeing even the unflappable Meta Knight go, damn, we're just fucked, huh, at a certain point. There's also just a lot of cool fights in this mode, and the time limits make it feel very cinematic and climactic while still being a fun romp. It's my understanding that the enhanced DS remake of this game, Superstar Ultra, features a mode that's basically just this but with King Dedede, and I can't wait to play that when I eventually play Superstar Ultra. I was facing a constant deluge of comments about that version of the game when streaming Superstar, and while I certainly get the impression that Ultra is a great remake that all but supplants the original in the eyes of many fans, I'm still glad I played the original first. Not only is it a great game in a vacuum, but seeing it in the context of gaming history really impresses upon me how impressive it was at the time. It's a fantastic platformer with boatloads of personality and unique little touches that put it above the rest. You can really feel the Sakurai energy in this one, with lots of cute ideas like the turn-based RPG boss, or the fact that there are goddamn fighting game control scheme elements in Kirby's moveset. Never did I think I'd be doing charge inputs in Kirby, but here we are. Wow, what's this? A game that actually came out this year? Yeah, that's right, and it's friend slop too. Grayfruit really fell off, huh? What can I say? This is a fun game with cool design. I've always been a little more judgmental of multiplayer games because of the simple fact that any game can be fun if you play it with good friends. Even dog shit like Skibbity Got Rooms can be enjoyable just by screwing around in it with people whose company you enjoy. So I'm always taking my love of multiplayer screw around with your friends games with a grain of salt because in my mind they don't have to actually do very much to make a compelling experience. That being said, I think Peak cracks the code. It has a cool core premise of climbing a mountain that has well-designed caveats to it. I think climbing games are kind of awesome and a bit of an underexplored genre because of how cruel and unrelenting they can be, but that's kind of the secret sauce that draws me to them. One bad mistake can easily spell the end of your entire half-hour-long run, and that lends climbing games to a certain type of very real tension, and an extremely satisfying feeling of accomplishment when you reach the, in this case titular, peak. The fact that the mountain gets randomized every day or so adds replay value, but it also just makes it feel more real. Gamers know that there is no crueler mistress than RNG, and while it seems that certain protections have been put in place so it never becomes truly impossible to progress, I've seen some messed up obstacles in Peak that seem insurmountable. But with enough preparation and poking and prodding and planning, you'd be shocked at what you can get past with enough experience. Just as many runs fall to these crazy late game obstacles, of course, but that feeling of perfectly coordinating with your team and your inventory and your constantly shrinking inventory space to overcome such an obstacle is an unmatched feeling. This is where multiplayer co-op shines. The sense of camaraderie you build with your partners in games like this is extremely potent to us gamers, who aren't used to having friends. I was initially particularly skeptical of this game because of its mimetic title, but it proved itself to me in the end, and even after several victories, I'm sure I'll be coming back to play some more in those new biomes in the future. You're, probably not seeing those victories right now, but I swear they did happen, I just did them off camera. Seriously. Stop looking at me like that. Boy, am I glad I waited till mid-December to write this list. Bits and Bops wowed me with its demo a while back, and I'm happy to report the full game lived up almost entirely to my extremely high expectations going in. I will disclose I was sent a free key to this game, but I was in no way paid to do anything, let alone praise it. This is essentially just indie rhythm heaven, and a lot of the time I'm iffy on these kinds of things. Like, I'm a big indie game guy, obviously, but I'm always hesitant when an indie game just goes, it's been too long since there was an entry in insert beloved Nintendo franchise here, time for us fans to take up the torch and make a new one. Obviously, there are numerous examples of this going well. Pizza Tower was a fantastic evolution of the Wario Land formula, and Aero GPX actually kind of replaces F-Zero for me, and that's just a couple of the ones I've played. I've heard Bug Fables is good. Anyway, I'm often suspicious of these because a lot of them aren't really capable of bringing even the level of polish of the Nintendo original, let alone expanding on it into something that surpasses it, but thankfully Bits and Bops is solidly in the good camp. To anyone who's not familiar, Rhythm Heaven is essentially a collection of mini-games that all center around accomplishing simple, repetitive tasks to the rhythm of a song. I know from personal experience that that's a pretty hard sell and doesn't really sound fun on its own, but you have to trust me when I say this is a crown jewel of Nintendo franchises. It's an extremely charming series with a lot of personality, and it's got well-designed gameplay that's incredibly satisfying to play. Attempts have been made in the past to try to capture Rhythm Heaven's essence, some admirable, some much less so, but I think Bits and Bops is the first one to really hit the nail on the head, so to speak. The minigames are inherently satisfying to play, it's got a cute base art style with a lot of potential for variety, and all the little details come together into something really special. There is an extremely unfortunate character design in the second stage that I've seen people accuse of being AI art, but I assure you, that is just a sad coincidence, and the game is very clearly made by talented, real artists. The music in particular wowed me. Rhythm Heaven has great songs, but I kind of felt myself liking the actual songs maybe a little more in this game. It's got a really fun, modern, funkish feel, with a retro flair that brings a smile to my face whenever it comes out. I think my biggest issue with this game is simply that I was left hungering for more at the end. There's about half as much content as most Rhythm Heaven games, with a typical Rhythm Heaven game having about 40 main minigames and 10 remixes, and Bits and Bops having 20 main minigames and 5 remixes, with some cool bonus stuff on the side too, as usual. That's probably going to be a bit jarring to most series veterans who have come to expect a certain length, but I personally don't see it as an inherent problem. If the worst you can say about a game is, I just wish there was more of it, that's pretty good. From the looks of it, they're planning on adding some kind of remix editor to the game at some point, which I'll eagerly await as a perfect excuse to come back to it. Joining the esteemed ranks of games whose names double as insults, Grow Up is the sequel to a personal favorite indie game of mine, Grow Home. Well, I say that, it's not really indie by any definition, but it feels as though it fits right in with that crowd. This is another climbing game, one where you play as a cute little robot named Bud who climbs hand over hand, bounces on mushrooms, glides through the air, and grows enormous plants to create new paths and structures to platform over. The original game was just about a straight climb upward, whereas the second game takes place on this one enormous Mario Galaxy planet. The planet has different biomes where different plants live and different open-world challenges can be found. I'm a guy who really puts a lot of value in playing entire series from the first entry, if you're going to play them, but you may notice on this list I'm going to deviate from that philosophy several times. I think Grow Up just totally replaces Grow Home in every way. It's simply the same game, but bigger and better, but not so big that it's overwhelming. It's the perfect kind of sequel where the essential experience is extremely similar to the original, but has been upgraded in numerous ways. I won't bore you with all the little details because there's nothing mind-blowing, but it all comes together into something really magical. Looking at online reviews for this game, it seems like reception was mixed, so maybe I'm just an outlier in how much I like this game, but I think they really nailed it. I really particularly like what these big growable vines bring to the game. Maybe this is just a result of me not having much Minecraft experience, but I found it very satisfying to drastically physically change the shape of the landscape with my actions. The serenity and sense of accomplishment you get just gliding around your plant structure like a leaf on the wind is unmatched by any other game I've played. In a way, it's kind of like a smaller Breath of the Wild, which is to say, a better Breath of the Wild. The story is a complete joke and barely matters. I kind of wish they'd done something a little more with the fact that the ship you're trying to get to and repair is called Mom, but the actual dialogue is more jokey than symbolic. Maybe it didn't need anything more because this game was great regardless. I'm cheating a bit by including a game here that's currently in early access, although the amount of content for it is already enough that it filled a full 2.5 hours stream for me. Beatblock is a rhythm game where you control a little guy named Cranky, who sits in the center of the screen and holds out a paddle that you can move in 360 degrees with your mouse or a joystick. Notes approach you from the edge of the screen, and you have to respond to them with the appropriate paddle movement. Some notes you simply block, some you avoid, some you have to catch on the back of your paddle, some you have to hit with the side of your paddle, which is the really tricky part, and all of those can be modified to require a timed button press as well. It starts very simple, but quickly piles on the stuff you have to do until you're pulling off some pretty crazy looking combos. This game kind of reminds me of the arcade game Chrono Circle, no relation, which is a personal favorite of mine as a confessed casual at rhythm games. This radial note system just itches my brain in a really fun way and opens up for some really interesting and cool charting, which thankfully Beatblock also has in spades. Not only are the levels well made, but they have lots of fun visual flares to them that make the game a feast for the eyes and a joy to play. This game also has a custom level editor, which I haven't used myself yet, but I can tell is quite robust judging from the custom levels I've seen and played so far. Definitely keep an eye on this one if you're a fan of other similar rhythm games like Osu or Adofy or Geometry Dash. POCO is a fun point-and-click adventure game. I bet some of you didn't even know they made those. This is what I would call a no-excuse game, as in you have no excuse not to play it. It's really good, it's short, it's free, and it's friendly to newcomers to the genre while also providing enough mental stimulation to not be a bore to veterans. So many point-and-click adventures fall into the categories of so easy it might as well be a visual novel, or so difficult it's nearly impossible to complete without a guide, and it's so satisfying to see how this game hits the sweet spot in between. It also comes with a decent amount of action set pieces that test your motor skills and don't suck ass like most point-and-click adventure game action set pieces do. I don't really want to say a bunch about this game because you are going to play it, and there are numerous wonderful whimsical moments to experience blind. But I will simply say, the art style is beautiful, the soundtrack is amazing, it's got great writing that teeters between humorous and sweet with grace, and the gameplay is varied and satisfying. If I had to complain about something, I'd say I was hoping the story would be a little more thematically rich, but it ends up being more of an Alice in Wonderland kind of absurdist romp with memorable characters, which I also see the value in, while maybe wishing there was a little bit more going on between the lines. I also found the ending to be a little disappointing, but other than that, it is nearly perfect and doesn't overstay its welcome by even a second. Did I mention it's free? This one was certainly a surprise for me. I thought it looked cute in trailers, but I was actually quite shocked at just how good it ended up being. This is a co-op platformer set in a world made almost entirely of Lego, including the two main characters who are just 1x1 bricks with little eyes on the side. You and your buddy roll and bounce around the world trying to achieve your dream of launching a spaceship, and the entire story is told wordlessly, which is really impressive considering how many specific emotional beats there are. I won't sugarcoat it, the end of this dumb little Lego game made me a little misty-eyed, and that's not really a distinction I give to a lot of games. It's just got a really sweet, simple story, and without wishing to spoil too much, there's a lopsided nature to the story that makes for a really cool and unique co-op experience. That lopsidedness is integrated perfectly into the gameplay too, and I absolutely love when story and gameplay blend seamlessly together like this. Speaking of gameplay, most of what you'll be doing throughout this game is platforming by attaching and detaching yourself from various LEGO obstacles, with occasional segments where you actually have to build structures or machines to help you on your way. I'm a pretty average level of nostalgic for LEGO. They were a part of my childhood, but I never had any of the super fancy Millennium Falcon sets or anything. I just had a red pail filled with a gaudy rainbow assortment of bricks which I would haphazardly slap together into crude little robots, and this game pleasantly transported me back to that time. I found myself getting really truly nostalgic, not just out of being reminded of a product from my youth, but from being so effectively placed back in the mindset of childlike play. There were many times I found myself just playing around with the mechanics alongside my partner as we ignored the critical path, which I don't necessarily tend to do even in a lot of games I absolutely love. It made me feel a deep warmth, not only for my partner, but also for humanity in general, as corny as that sounds. What a surprising amount of heart and depth coming from a game about little Lego bricks only capable of saying the word la. I grew up watching the angry video game nerd, and while I think I've grown out of it now, I still look back on those days fondly. However, I think he may have damaged my perception of the NES all those years ago. For the longest time, even after I got an NES and played a bunch of games on it, I kinda had this perception that there were about 10 good NES games and all the rest were just varying levels of unplayable garbage. In the past few years, as I've delved deeper and deeper into NES history and collecting, I've pulled a real 180 on the system. There are a ton of awesome games for this thing, and once you get an idea for what the limitations and expectations of the era were like, you can find yourself getting blown away by some games that were really spectacular for the time and still hold up today. Mr. Gimmick, or just Gimmick as it was originally known in Japan, is a cute, charming, challenging platformer with a fantastic sense of weight and momentum. The cover art got utterly botched and the music had to be downgraded a tiny bit for technical reasons, but otherwise the game came over to the West more or less unscathed. This game steals Mario 3's lunch money. It's so fast-paced and jam-packed with variety and cute graphical details, and the story and the style go so perfectly together. You guys know I love a game that's full of secrets and cool speedrun strategies, and this one has both in abundance. There's a great video by Illusory Wall explaining a lot of the cool details in this game, and I'd highly recommend you go check it out, or just play the game for yourself. It's hard, and the gauntlet of final bosses in particular drove me to the brink of insanity, but man is it a cool game, especially considering what system it's on. The music is particularly memorable, and I love the movement mechanics and the way that such a simple move with such simple rules has so much complexity that emerges when you experiment with it. The game seems to expect you to figure out how to do certain tricks on subsequent playthroughs, and there's this whole thing you need to do to access a secret stage, get a secret ending that I haven't done yet but want to someday. I did watch a speedrun of that boss gauntlet, and it looks like there's some sort of exploit that makes it a lot easier, so maybe you'll see me stream this game again someday and go for the secret ending. Even without that, it's a clear top 5er of the entire NES library, and that's coming from someone who's actually played a lot of them at this point. I want to say in some random ancient stream, I made some snarky comment about how if they ever brought back Kirby Air Ride, it'd be mid and no one would play it and it would be quickly forgotten. Well, I'm happy to report that I was wrong. Well, wrong about it being mid. Time will tell if this goes on to be highly played or quickly forgotten, but I know I won't be stopping anytime soon. This is another in the unusual category of games that totally replace their predecessors. Besides a few tiny aesthetic aspects of the original I miss, I don't see any reason to ever return to Kirby Air Ride. This game's kind of a sequel and kind of a remake. It has everything the original had, but bigger and better with a ton more options and variety. Plus it has online play and a single-player campaign with a story and cool cutscenes. To anyone who's never dabbled in Kirby Air Ride, this is an unconventional racing game where you automatically move forward without having to press any buttons. Famously, the original game had controls that required only a single button and a joystick, which I've heard some people bemoan, but I personally love. I don't know about you guys, but complex control schemes always trip me up, and playing something like Elden Ring, I always find myself getting buttons mixed up for the first few hours of gameplay. Unfortunately, it looks like Sakurai added a second button to this new one for special moves and quick swapping vehicles, but it's still a very simple control scheme, and in my opinion, that's a good thing. Gliding around and boosting around corners is inherently satisfying, and there's a really exhilarating sense of speed you get racing around the tracks in Air Ride mode. The real meat of the game for me is City Trial, just like the original, and this game's City Trial is beefed up to the max and makes the original look more like a prototype. The city is bigger, you get more power-ups, it supports more players, there's more vehicles, more characters, more random events, more everything. If you thought the original City Trial was addictive, this one is on another level. Sometimes it's fun to go online and face a more competitive, cutthroat set of opponents, but I also very much enjoy just playing against 15 CPUs and seeing how overpowered I can get with upgrades. This game also benefits from a very modern Sakurai sensibility where everything is customizable. Original City Trial had like 2 songs total, whereas in Air Riders you can choose from about 50, both brand new ones and old ones from previous Kirby games. And just like in Smash, you can even change how likely each respective one is to play. It's levels of replayability like this that make guys like me go missing. This is also a game that legitimately feels like it couldn't have worked on the original Switch. Visually, it is stunning, but I'm more talking about the sheer speed you can go without any kind of lag or trouble loading. I play as Rick a lot because he's awesome, and using his special after picking up a bunch of speed upgrades in City Trial is genuinely kind of mind-blowing. I've seen some fast movement in 3D games, but this is just astounding to look at. To me, this is more of a system seller for the Switch 2 than DK Bonanza. More like number Space Channel 5. Yeah, okay. Space Channel 5 Part 2 is, unsurprisingly, the sequel to Space Channel 5, which is an extremely charming rhythm game that, in my opinion, is held back by certain technical issues. The input system is buggy, the pre-rendered backgrounds are out of sync with the camera movements, and the pre-rendered cutscenes are very stiff and rudimentary. All of this is addressed in the sequel, which is another in this list that surely acts as a wholesale replacement for the original game. It even has similar plot structure and story beats to the original, and requires almost no prior knowledge to understand. It's essentially what we in the modern day might call a soft reboot, where it's technically a sequel, but it supplants the original in a lot of ways. Anyway, Space Channel 5 is primarily a call-and-response Simon Says style rhythm game series in the same vein as Parappa the Rapper. Various enemies call out D-pad directions and buttons corresponding to shoot laser or shoot beam that rescues hostages, and you have to repeat them back in time with the music. The second game expands on this core mechanic in numerous creative ways, my favorite being the inclusion of musical instrument duels. The main selling point of this game is its presentation and style. It's set in a groovy, retro-futuristic world that harkens back to sci-fi stylings of the 50s and 60s. The main character, Ulala, like ooh la la, you know, is an absolute icon, and it's a joy watching her sing and dance her way past a legion of colorful, zany opponents. Reporting for the titular Space Channel 5, Ulala is working against the machinations of a larger-than-life villain using mind control to force space citizens to dance. It's a little confusing because obviously this game is all about dancing, but I think the idea is that the mind control dancing is unsatisfactory and non-groovy. Ulala uses her satisfactory and groovy and wholesome dance moves to recruit a posse of colorful characters to aid her in fighting the main villain. This posse famously includes Space Michael, who is literally just Michael Jackson, voice acted by Michael Jackson, implied to be the same character from the Moonwalker movie. It kinda seems like he recorded his lines at a separate location from all the other voice actors and just sent the audio to Sega in the mail. His mic is super quiet, and I swear to God he pronounced Ulala wrong. It's kinda hard to hear, but he said Ulala, right?
Get out of here, Ulala. This is a trap.
All the characters are great though, especially Space Michael, and it's delightful seeing the campy, corny story unfold, with all the characters cutting numerous rugs throughout. I particularly love the extremely blatant skeletal animation reuse across different models. It's very noticeable in the scenes where Ulala— I said it, that was real, I unironically just did that. It's very noticeable in the scenes where Ulala leads all the rescued hostages to safety, and they all clearly share the exact same strutting animation. This is the sort of thing that could have come across cheap or laughable, but I think this game carries every ridiculous aspect with grace and distinction. It's so utterly committed to its style and energy, it's just beautifully shameless, and that's what makes it so magical. This is a tricky tone to go for. It's cool, but it's also laugh-out-loud funny. It's a combination that tends to turn sour in practice, but this game just nails it. There are also a lot of additional aspects to Part 2 that granted a lot of depth and replay value. Going through the character profiles, you may notice a lot of them giving hints about hidden inputs you can do during what appear to be cutscenes, meaning even when you're not being explicitly told to perform Simon Says sequences, you can still sneak in extra hits that will contribute to your overall score. There's also a survival mode, local co-op, and a New Game Plus with a bunch of fun differences. You can even unlock a bunch of costumes to use in New Game Plus, ranging from actual costumes for Ulala to more blatant model swaps that look hilarious. What a treat this must have been for any rhythm game fan in the early 2000s. Initially, when I streamed this game, I did a bit where I pretended to play it while my lovely fiancée Bella was sat there silently with the controller doing all the actual inputs. I'd just like to make it clear to anyone who watched that stream that I went back after that and played New Game Plus on my own. Let it be known that as a reviewer I'm beholden to a certain standard of integrity, and I've cleared the extremely low bar of actually playing the games I include on this list. What we saw with Bella was essentially an ideal playthrough where we saw all the special scenarios that happen if you rescue hostages with 100% accuracy. My playthrough had fewer of those, but it was still deeply enjoyable and easier than expected, although I did game over a couple of times at some understandably tricky parts near the end. The parts that messed me up the most were the parts where you had to memorize comparatively long sequences of inputs, but thankfully the game doesn't do that very much and the health system was just forgiving enough to let me tank a couple hits here and there. I'm pleased to report that on top of having the best presentation ever, it's also a really fun game to play, and just challenging enough to keep me on my toes without becoming bullshit like some rhythm games sometimes do. Like many other games on this list, I could see myself returning to this game in the future to try to get an even better run. Now, I must unfortunately end on a somber note because this game is currently quite difficult to get your hands on. Both games are available on the Dreamcast and PS2, but obviously that's not a method most players will be able to utilize nowadays. The version of Part 2 that I played on stream was on Steam, but sadly that version is now unavailable to purchase. I only have it because I bought it years ago before it was delisted. It's a shame because it's a pretty good port all things considered. It's HD with widescreen support and only a little bit buggy at times. I'd love to see this port or some variant of it pop up on PS5 or something, but I understand it's tricky bringing rhythm games forward several console generations. If you can get your hands on a physical copy, or God forbid, emulate it, it's a phenomenal rhythm game that deserves to be remembered. Despite being a huge fan of From Software's Dark Souls series and all its spiritual successors, for the longest time I'd somehow never played the original Demon's Souls. Well, this year I finally got my hands on a PS3 and I did my first run, and wow, I actually kinda loved it. I've always heard people refer to it as prototype Dark Souls and say that it doesn't really hold up to the same standard as some of the later games, but personally, I regard it as being on the same level as some of my favorites in the series. Its differences from Dark Souls are well documented, but I was struck by how, despite having an overall different level structure, this game outlines numerous concepts that would be revisited in later games. Dragon breathing fire on a bridge you have to get across? Demon's Souls did it. Bird in a nest you can trade items with by dropping them on the ground and resetting the area? Demon's Souls did it. Gigantic boss with a weakness to a sword that slashes the sky with the power of storms? Demon's Souls did it. I could seriously go on and on and on listing these for like an hour, but I won't. I'll just say I was constantly astounded by how many beloved situations and tropes throughout the series were already present in the very first of these Souls-like series. I also found myself falling in love with the vibe of this game. There's certainly a lot of similar stuff to the later games in the series, but this one hit me hard in all the right places. It's just the right mix of spooky and gothic and dark with just a little bit of humor and silliness mixed in so it's not totally overwhelming. I also loved the insane variety of bosses and how many of them were gimmicky puzzle bosses. I like the kinds of bosses we'd see in later series entries like Bloodborne and Elden Ring that focus primarily on timing sequences of dodges in a row, but I found the bosses of Demon's Souls utterly refreshing for how much they emphasize strategy over quick reflexes. There was a bit where I was stuck on this fire demon boss for a long time before I started strategizing and made myself as tanky as possible, and shockingly, the tank build ended up feeling like a very satisfying solution to the encounter. I'm well aware this runs counter to the way a lot of people regard Souls bosses, but I'll stick to my guns on this one. Screw you, H-Bomber guy, the Adjudicator is awesome. There are a few things that are a bit rough and unpolished about this entry in the series, but frankly, what entry doesn't have that? Elden Ring, I suppose, but personally I've started to feel that Elden Ring's removal of certain frictional aspects of previous entries lends it a certain toothlessness and a lack of memorability. I loved Demon's Souls for every roughness and imperfection, and I'm sure I'll come back to play the remake someday. Well, this was inevitable. The original Hollow Knight is surely one of my favorite games of all time, being quite nearly perfect in my eyes. The art style is simultaneously adorable and beautiful, the world is extremely well realized, and the gameplay is refined, challenging, and satisfying. You've probably heard this whole spiel from 10 other nerds and don't need to hear it again. It's a phenomenal Metroidvania that stands head and shoulders above its contemporaries, and long story short, Silksong is a very worthy sequel. I'd be quick to say that I probably still like the original just the tiniest bit better, but that really is only by the smallest of margins. Part of it is almost certainly a case of sequelitis, but honestly I think it's totally fair to judge a sequel by comparing it to previous entries. It's kind of a simultaneous blessing and curse sequels get to have. They don't have to do nearly as much work establishing a world and a style and a tone, but they will inevitably be expected to put leagues more effort into refining and expanding on what made the original great, which Silksong mostly does with, again in my opinion, a slightly less majestic and whimsical experience. There were just so many moments in the original game that really stuck with me, and Silksong just had fewer of those. Bella made a really good point saying that the number of funny benches is down significantly in Silksong, which I think is actually a valid metric by which you can measure this kind of thing. It's obviously quite subjective in the end, and surely Silksong is trying to do something slightly different tonally, so maybe I'm too hard on it. Maybe this is pure nonsense, but I feel like Hollow Knight is a lot more Metroid and Silksong is a lot more Vania, you know what I mean? That's not a bad thing, it's just a thing, and I've personally always liked the vibe of Metroid a little bit more than that of Castlevania. Okay, that was a lot of negative talk, but truly I loved this game. Team Cherry has proven time and time again that they can make some incredible environments and stories, and boy did they deliver on this one. I especially loved a lot of the ways the cruelty and insidious nature of the Citadel were portrayed through gameplay and NPC dialogue. Christopher Larkin, as expected, also absolutely killed it on the soundtrack, even though I might consider the original game's soundtrack still just a tiny bit more memorable. Bilewater, the Choral Chambers, the Clockwork Core, just a few of the tracks that sent shivers up my spine hearing them for the first time. All the areas look absolutely breathtaking, and the enemy design and boss battles are as fun as ever. Many players noted the apparent sharp increase in difficulty from the first game, but honestly I'm glad it was hard. I didn't want to just breeze through it based on skills I had acquired in Hollow Knight, and by golly there was no breezing to be had. The fact that Hornet controls somewhat differently to the Knight made a big difference I think too. Somewhat ironically, I found that a lot of the late game side quest bosses were the easiest ones to beat, although maybe that's just because I waited too long to fight them and better routing would have made them a lot less of a schlep. I think even above that, my main complaint would be that some of the quests you do for NPCs are a real chore, like all these ones where you have to grind a certain type of enemy for their drops, and as much as I'm looking forward to replaying this game in the future, I'm not looking forward to those parts. What I'm really looking forward to though is the prospect of DLC, particularly the prospect of something like the Godmaster DLC in the original game. These bosses are so fucking cool, and I would love having access to a way to easily refight them over and over again, regardless of if it uses the same framing device Hollow Knight did. A couple days after writing this script, they teased the first DLC, which doesn't appear to be a boss rush, but I eagerly await it nonetheless. This is a game I feel never got the attention it truly deserved. Originally released as Monolith, but undergoing a name change for its publication under Video Game Donkey's publishing company Big Mode, Star of Providence is a top-down bullet hell shooter and Binding of Isaac-style roguelike hybrid. As a huge Isaac fan, I've had a lot of Isaac-like games offered and recommended to me, but they never just quite scratch that same itch that Isaac does, and maybe this one doesn't quite either, but what it does do is extremely compelling, and I found myself entranced by it for numerous play sessions. I love bullet hell games, and its similarities structurally to Isaac made it so I could slip right into the gameplay loop and enjoy it to the fullest. It's a brutally difficult game, but incredibly satisfying to persevere and eventually master. I ended up doing most of the optional challenge stuff in this game, barring the late game loop mechanic, which I gave up on partway through grinding through, but even then I was able to enjoy a ludicrous amount of optional content that kept me happy for weeks. The music is amazing, it's got good atmosphere, the combat is tough but fair, and it's got just enough systems to min-max without being too much of a headache like Isaac can be sometimes. The bosses are a standout aspect, with lots of creative designs and fun, trippy bullet patterns to master. I'd say the story is maybe my least favorite aspect, with the game seeming a little too up its own lore, if that makes any sense. I don't know, maybe I'm just a little tired at this point of games that are deliberately vague and lofty when telling you story, especially when it seems like under the surface there really isn't much of an actual compelling plot going on, but rather just a bunch of details to pick apart and debate on Reddit. I honestly don't have too much else to say about this one, it's just really, really good. If you like bullet hells, I would consider it a must-play, and even if you're not, maybe this could be your foot in the door to a very rewarding and exciting subgenre that deserves more love. What's great about it, too, is that there is a very well-defined, for lack of a better term, normie ending that's still plenty challenging to achieve and gives you a great exit point if you don't feel like you want to push yourself any further. But if you do want to push yourself further, there's a lot of additional content to seek out. Just play it on keyboard and mouse instead of controller, trust me, it's a lot easier. I assure you, it's not a joke, and I'm not trying to flex just how avant-garde my tastes are. Cruelty Squad was genuinely my favorite gaming experience of the year. Honestly, the rest of this list could probably be in a vastly different order if I'd done it on any other different day, but this vile piece of shit would still be firmly at the top. I unabashedly love this game. Every ugly texture, every nauseating visual effect, every ridiculous level design decision, it's a perfect mess, and it kind of blew my mind when I played it earlier in the year. Obviously, the first thing that hits you about this game is that it's stylized to the point of being nearly indecipherable. Not only are the visuals and the music intentionally abrasive, but the mechanics of the game itself are hostile and random and obtuse. Even reloading is weird, and at first awkward. You have to hold the right mouse button, then dip your mouse pointer down past a certain point on this bar. This feels like ass when you first use it, but now I kinda wish every FPS worked this way. It's got a great physical motion to it that you just don't get from pressing R. I will say this mechanic has utterly ruined reloading for me in every other first-person shooter because my instinct is to hit the Alt-Fire button then look directly down. Anyway, Cruelty Squad is an immersive sim assassination game in the same vein as the Hitman series, where you get dropped into a level and you have to kill a certain number of named targets roaming around. The real meat of this game, and what's so fun about it to me, is the sheer number of options you have in how you approach these problems. These levels might at first glance seem ridiculously difficult when approached with typical FPS tactics, but once you start to get even the slightest bit creative with how you tackle the assassinations, you'll come up with a plethora of crazy ideas that just work somehow, which is beautiful and satisfying and hilarious every time it happens. I must stress that the first couple hours of playing this game will more than likely be utterly miserable as you come to terms with how everything works, but please trust me when I say that when it clicks good. The levels are created with numerous looping paths throughout them and myriad different ways to solve problems. In the grand ImSim tradition, several levels can be cheesed by stacking objects to get over walls, as well as using various physics exploits to boost you to even greater heights. The weapons are a huge part of your toolkit too, having numerous synergies with the unlockable character upgrades you buy and find throughout your adventures. Not only do many of them offer unique problem-solving abilities, but they also just feel amazing to use, despite having some extremely bizarre models and sound effects. Once you get the hang of using all the tools in your arsenal, this game becomes a speedrunner's wonderland, a playground with seemingly endless ways to totally break the game. I've honestly never seen a game so eager to be broken, with some levels truly blurring the line between what even counts as being in bounds. I'd actually maybe argue that it's literally required to go out of bounds to complete the final level of the main non-secret levels. How is that even possible? What really puts this game above every other game I played this year, however, is the setting and the vibe. This is a game with themes, set in a hyper-capitalist hellscape, far past the heat death of artistry and hope, where empathy goes to die. Everyone in this world is stupid and greedy and corrupt, and the only way to get anywhere is to murder those in power until you yourself are consumed by corruption and greed. It's a perfect match to the abhorrently ugly art style and the abrasive, obtuse mechanics. Perhaps it speaks to just how dog shit 2025 was on a global scale that this game spoke to me so much when I played it. It really gets you in the mindset of someone totally and utterly broken by evil, uncaring institutions, with mechanics that directly reflect these ideas. For instance, when you die enough times, you develop a taste for human flesh, cannibalizing corpses for a measly single health point. But in this brutal world, that single health point could be the difference that helps you live to see another day. Then, sitting there in the resulting pile of guts and viscera, you can pick through the organs left behind from your victim to sell on the ever-changing in-game stock market, so you can afford some horrifying surgery that makes you better attuned to murdering your fellow man. This quite literally visceral feel to the game even extends to the menus. Rather than being an orderly left-to-right list of stages, it's this grotesque, twisting intestinal tract that you have to somewhat memorize to know what order the levels are played in. It is a delightfully miserable experience that's more than content to wallow in human suffering, all with this darkly humorous edge to it that keeps the experience from being totally soul-crushing. I know it may not be to everyone's tastes, but I absolutely loved it. It's a perfect mix of being an extremely fun game while also being a piece of art that makes you think, and that's all I need at the end of the day. Okay, it turns out even after expanding the list past the usual 10, I still have stuff to yap about. Here are some honorable mentions that didn't quite make it onto the list for one reason or another. This is an awesome NES game I played this year, but I excluded it from this list because there will be a detailed review of it in my Zapper History Part 2 video, coming soonish. No spoilers. This is a game I didn't play myself, but rather watched Bella play snippets of, and from what I could see, it looked like a really cool, somewhat flawed, subversive RPG in the same vein as Undertale. It takes Undertale's puzzle-esque fights and expands upon the idea with a seemingly endless buffet of memorable, personality-driven encounters where you have to figure out the right thing to say to the enemy while dodging creative, colorful bullet hell attacks. It's got a really beautiful art style and an uncompromising artistic sense. One kind of big problem is that one of the boss fights seems to have a translation error in that it actually breaks the logic of the fight, and hopefully they patch that out someday. Maybe use a guide if you get stuck on this one, but it's certainly a well-made, one-of-a-kind experience, from what I saw. Crow Country! This is another one like Stray Children I watched Bella play, but it seemed incredible. This is an isometric survival horror game paying blatant homage to classic survival horrors like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. I absolutely adore the art style in this game. It's definitely got that wonderful PS1 stank to it, but it also kind of does its own thing really well. Funnily enough, the game I found myself thinking of the most when watching this was the original Luigi's Mansion. It's just got that specific cozy diorama-esque vibe to it. It's a great mix of adorable and spooky. It was also generally really well designed. It's puzzly with tense action here and there that never gets too overwhelming but still keeps you on your toes. I also found myself shocked at how much I liked the story. It absolutely fits in with early survival horror crowd with lots of secrets and twists and turns, and I was shocked at how much I liked the protagonist by the end. In the beginning she struck me as a bit generic, but she really grew on me over time. Definitely check this one out if any of that sounds appealing to you. This is the newest in the now long line of Katamari games, and while I found it enjoyable, I also found it rather disappointing, with what felt like a worse physics engine and all its most enjoyable and memorable moments being recycled concepts from We Love Katamari. The soundtrack also has a slightly lower density of bangers on it. Any Katamari game is fun, but playing this one just reinforced in my mind that this series probably could have stopped after the second entry, and we as a society wouldn't have missed out on much. Well, that's all for today. I hope you got a kick out of this and maybe feel like checking some of these games out. As a gaming YouTuber, I'm not really contributing to society very much, but it always warms the deepest cockles of my heart whenever someone says they discovered a game they love based on my recommendation. I figure I gotta be good for something, right? And what the hell, sound off in the comments some standout games from this year, and maybe you can get that feeling too. Here's to another year of ignoring the ills of the real world with great games. Zapper History Part 2 should be coming sometime in February if I get my ass properly in gear, so look forward to that if you're into these scripted videos. Consider checking out my Patreon if you want to get sneak peeks, looks behind the scenes, and other perks relating to my channel. As always, I really appreciate all the support you guys give. Bye bye!